All right, so let's go ahead and cover the lymphatic system in this video today. So our lymphatic system is, well, our immune system as we like to associate it, but it does a little bit more than that, and we'll see what all it does. So first, let's take a look at, some of the components of the lymphatic system. So one, the lymphatic system contains lymph, which is a near colorless fluid that is inside the lymphatic system. And we'll take a little bit of a deeper look at exactly what lymph is in a little bit. Lymphatics. So we will take a look at the different lymphatic vessels, such as capillaries, the various trunks and ducts, and additional structures such as lymph nodes, the thymus, bone marrow, and even the spleen. Lymphocytes, which we've also mentioned in the cardiovascular system, which are the white blood cells that help with the immune response and fighting off the infectious, pathogens that enter our body. So looking at the important functions of the lymphatic system, what exactly is the lymphatic system responsible for? One, it removes the excess interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid, let's take a look at that word. First, we'll just break it down. So inter means in between. So like if you interject a conversation or intercept something, you come in between two objects. Interstitial, this refers to the tissues. So the interstitial fluid is the fluid in between the tissue layers and outside of the cells, which we call extracellular fluid. So lots of terms for this word. Now the interstitial fluid enters the lymphatic system and becomes lymph fluid. So there's the, what we were talking about earlier. Now, the lymphatic system also transports fats and fat solubles, vitamins as well. So we do see that the lymphatic system does help to move the fat. So like when, people have like those procedures of like with, especially with massage where you do like, shoot, I can't even remember the name, like cryo stuff where you break down the fat cells and break up the fat cells and they try to push it into the lymph system and then circulate it out, which I think is a little crazy if that's what your goal of trying to do is, if you're trying to break down all the fat in your body, which, I mean, who knows if that's even true. And then it all goes to the heart. So you're essentially sending all this fatty deposits to your heart, which seems kind of counterintuitive for some beauty, I guess, but hey, who am I? And then, of course, we protect the body through immunity. As we saw, the white blood cells are part of this system. The lymphocytes, help with the immune response. So lymph, again, as we said, is the fluid that enters the lymphatic system. And as we said, this fluid is just the same continuation of the interstitial fluid that was outside of the lymphatic vessel, which has now entered into it. And so we'll see how exactly this lymphatic system really works to help with absorbing this interstitial fluid and what this interstitial fluid is in a second. How does lymph flow? Well, one, lymph likes to flow in one direction. Very similar to the cardiovascular system where we saw that blood flows in a circle essentially from the heart leading out to the body and then from the rest of the body back to the heart. Same thing, lymph follows what's called a centripetal direction, which means to flow towards the center, in this case the center being your heart here. And so we'll see how exactly this occurs. And as we said, all lymph fluid eventually flows back to the heart. So let's use this picture to explain what I was talking about. So if we zoom in here, we'll see that, well, one, alongside all the capillaries and all these different vessels and in between, permeating all in between these different tissues, is lymphatic vessels. As we can see here, like the lymphatic vessels and lymphatic capillaries permeating through all of the cardiovascular capillaries, because as we said, the capillaries are where the nutrient exchange occurs between cells and all these various things. So what happens is the exchange of all these solutes and vitamins and minerals, whatever have you, plus fluid comes out of the lymphatic capillary, or excuse me, not lymphatic capillary, but the cardiovascular capillary comes out. And so here we have what looks like an adipose cell. And then, we have this space in between the cell, which is the interstitial space. And then we see that there's this lymphatic vessel, which is then going to absorb the interstitial fluid into the lymphatic system, and then it's just going to travel through the lymph system back to the heart. So that it's just this constant cycle, right? The cardiovascular system's delivering, water and all these other essential things, and so it dumps everything out, and then the lymphatic system picks up what it needs, cycles it, cleans it, brings it back to the heart to circulate it all over again. And if we zoom in a lot, we can actually see a good little bit of how this works. So you can see like these little hairs on the lymphatic capillaries. Well, as the cells move and expand and things move, these hairs pull, and so the lymphatic capillary, it's like kind of like think like a Chinese finger trap thing. You know how like expands and like contracts and all this, like it widens up and opens, which sucks the fluid in and then traps it, and then it starts to transport it through the lymphatic capillary and system, which then will pass through the nodes as we see here. So lymphatic capillaries and lacteals, what exactly are they? Well, as we said, the lymphatic capillaries are the tiny microscopic vessels of the lymphatic system. And unlike the cardiovascular system, where we had arteries turning into arterioles, which branch into the capillaries, which those capillaries then branch back into veins that go back to the heart, lymphatic capillaries actually have terminal ends, as we see here, right? That's a terminal end. So now lacteals are specific lymphatic structures that we find in the digestive tract to help with absorption of fats, specifically in that part of the system. So the additional lymphatic vessels outside of the capillaries, right, are just, well, lymph vessels. And as we saw with the cardiovascular system, very similar structures, we had valves, which will help to prevent the fluid from flowing backwards. Again, we don't want fluid to flow backwards essentially ever in the body, and so especially with the lymphatic flow of fluid as well. So this, very similar to, like we said, the cardiovascular system, fluid in one chamber pushes through into the next chamber, which then this valve will close, and then it'll push through into the next chamber, and so on and so forth, all the way until it comes back to the heart. Now, when we get to the main cavity, the main part of the body, we find the trunks of the body. So there's two trunks. We have, or what we call main or thoracic ducts, right? We have two ducts essentially. So the right lymphatic duct, which is actually like a big long chain of lymph nodes, but the left duct is the main thoracic duct. So if we actually zoom in here, you can see how large the main thoracic duct is. Now, both ducts, the left and right, lead and dump their lymph fluid into the subclavian veins, on their respective sides. So the subclavian vein on the left side is where the left or thoracic duct will dump its fluids into, and then same for the right side. And then, as we know, the subclavian veins right near the superior vena cava are going to go right into the right atrium of the heart, and then it just circles all over again. So it's important to note that why is the left side bigger? Well, as we can see in this little depiction here, the right lymphatic duct only drains or only absorbs, I guess you could say, the lymph fluid and interstitial fluid from the upper right quadrant of the body. So essentially we could say 1/4 of the body is drained by the right lymphatic duct, while the rest of the body is drained by the left lymphatic duct. So that's why it is significantly larger. Now, lymphokinesis is, well, if we break that word, lymph, like lymph fluid, kinesis, movement. Lymphokinesis is the movement of lymph fluid through the system. And this is aided by several structures or mechanisms, very similar to the way that blood returns to the heart through the veins. So one, the skeletal muscle pump, as our muscles contract, that creates, squeezing pressure in the body, which then pushes the fluid through the system. As well, this works for the veins as well. The respiratory pump, especially for the thoracic ducts, right? Breathing is going to cause a lot of that, fluid movement in the thoracic cage there and those thoracic ducts. Compressive forces such as massage. Massage is extremely beneficial for the lymphatic system and moving lymphatic fluid. Hydrostatic pressure, so if you dive into a pool and have that water pressure upon you, and that can move the fluid as well. Compressive sleeves, right? If you've ever seen someone wearing compressive sleeves, that'll also do that as well as the pulsation of nearby arteries. So as the arteries throb and pulse, that can also aid the movement of the lymph fluid. So there are two types of lymphocytes, and where exactly are they produced, and then where do they mature? So all blood cells, well, the ones we're paying attention to in this particular slide, are formed in the bone marrow. So red blood cells, right, and especially the lymphocytes will be formed in the bone marrow. Now, there's two types of lymphocytes that we produce. We produce B cells and T cells. So what exactly what exactly are they doing, or where do they mature? So B cells, B stands for bone. So these B cells actually stay in the bone themselves to mature and then become useful and then transfer throughout the body and then do their particular job. And they usually flow through the bloodstream. And then T cells, so they start in the bone marrow, they're produced by the bone marrow, then they are released, and then they go to the thymus to mature. So they're going to college abroad, you could say, instead of going to college at the local local college in their hometown. So the T cells are probably the ones we pay more attention to, specifically because they're the ones that are affected by HIV/AIDS, and we'll see that in the pathologies. So in this case, like we said, two types of lymphocytes produced, both produced at the bone marrow, but the B cells stay in the bone to mature. T cells go to the thymus. T for thymus, right? Makes sense. B for bone. Now, the lymph nodes, what exactly are they? Where do we find the large clusters of them? And what are some additional structures that assist with the immune response, specifically in the GI tract? So lymph nodes are these little convoluted nodules that are located throughout the chain of the lymphatic system. I like to call them the highway patrol points. So if you're driving down an interstate, right, those little police stop sections and stuff. It's kind of like that, right? So the fluid's going to travel in here, and then we have this lymphatic tissue that contains those lymphocytes and other white blood cells that are going to kill off anything bad in the system, bad throughout in the fluid, right? And so they're basically just the little police checkpoints along the chain. And so obviously when we're sick, we bring more lymphocytes into the lymph nodes. And that's why when you're sick, especially like an upper respiratory tract or something, your lymph nodes get swollen because they're engorged with more cells, more fluid to fight off the infection. Now, large clusters of lymph nodes are found essentially at the folds of the body. So our main ones would be the axillary lymph nodes, which are in the armpit, inguinal lymph nodes, which are in the inner thigh or groin area, we could say, popliteal, which are behind the knee, cubital, or more specifically antecubital, which is the front of the elbow. We have cervical lymph nodes, right? The cervical lymph nodes, that way I just kind of palpated there, for a throat infection. You know, around the ankles, you know, pretty much the main spots there. But like we said, any fold typically has them. And then Pierre patches answers the last part of the question, which are located within the GI tract that aid with immune responses. So as we said, the lymphatic system is responsible for immune responses and immunity. So let's take a look at classifying immunity to an extent. We have what's called nonspecific defense or immunity. So nonspecific, well, it's not specific. It's not targeting anything in particular. It's just the natural fail-safes, you could say, right? So these are non-specific barriers, boundaries, and stuff that are just part of our general defense to infection. These reactions occur no matter what it is, whether it was some dust, whether it was a virus, whether whatever, right? So some of the examples would be barriers, right? So like we said, the chemical composition on the surface of the skin, right, that's going to fight off stuff. You know, if something, just some sort of weird bacteria is inside the lymphatic system, even if it's a harmless bacteria, we're still just going to take it out, right? Who cares? You know, just get them out of here. So, and that would be like a cellular response, right? Because of the, you know, just the various white blood cells that are just going to kill off anything that just shouldn't be there anyways. And then inflammation, right, is also a natural body response, right? Especially when we get sick, right? Raise our core temperature, all that stuff, right? Just a natural reaction or response to injury and infection. So these are just general things that we're going to do, that our body does, that will fight off the infections and all these other things. Now, taking a look specifically at inflammation, right? We should all be very aware of inflammation, but why not just make sure we cover it and in its details. Remember that inflammation is our body's response to injury or infection that serves the purpose to maximize tissue repair or fight off that infection. So remember the various you know, characteristics of inflammation. As we see, we have heat, redness, swelling, pain, and a loss of function, right? If I sprain my ankle, blood is going to rush to the area, right? The area is going to swell, so I have more space for maximizing healing. Blood is going to go into the area, which creates heat because of the movement of fluid. The excess fluid in the area, especially blood, is going to create the redness. It's obviously going to hurt, and that hurt, my brain is going to tell me, like, oh, this hurts. Let's not stand on this sprained ankle, thus leading to a loss of function. Now, we can use these general terms to understand different types of infection. So a local inflammation is, well, inflammation that is in a small targeted spot of the body. So local inflammation is generally a regional contraindication for massage, right? If something is inflamed, depending on the nature of why, we want to avoid that. Now, systemic inflammation is where the inflammation occurs throughout the body. So, for instance, if you had the flu, right, you would have systemic inflammation throughout the body, you know, your whole body is just involved with trying to fight off what's in there. And so then systemic inflammation typically is an absolute contraindication for massage, especially depending on the nature of the systemic inflammation. Now, if someone is just coming over a cold, if you take the precautions, maybe it's justifiable and you can still work on that client because massage does improve lymphatic function, and you know, inadvertently through lots of different processes, namely, you know, the engagement of the parasympathetic system, you will actually help with increasing the immune response of the body. You know, that's definitely a good educated guess. I haven't seen any data to truly support that we increase immune function, but through various other things and benefits that massage does that is proven, it is something you could gather as possible. And then chronic inflammation is inflammation that lasts longer than a few weeks. And, you know, outside of specific examples, it could be a contraindication for massage, either outright or just avoiding a certain area. So chronic inflammation typically, you know, is representative of some sort of pathology that either is long-term or consistent, comes and goes, stuff like that. But just understand, like we said, just understanding the nature and definition of these words, we can, you know, understand at least what the type of information we're dealing with is. So as we said, we had the non-specific immunity or defense. Well, now we have specific. So in this case, we are prioritizing and targeting the specific particular, you know, pathogens that are infecting our body. So our immune system grows and develops and learns over time. So when we get the common cold first in our lives, it's huge, right? It knocks us on the floor. But as we, you know, get exposed to these pathogens, our body learns how to fight these pathogens better and faster and more efficient. And so a lot of times you might actually come into contact with certain pathogens and never get sick just because your body stopped the process. Or if you get sick, you don't get sick as much or as bad. So, and then of course, you know, there's a lot of other things that play into immunity, such as age, nature of health, and stuff like that. I think that might be on the next slide. But yes, so specific defense or immunity is the specific approach that our immune system takes to defend ourselves against specific or certain pathogens. And well, you know, okay, so we got here, right here. Like we said, the CD4 and CD8 plus cells are the specific cells targeted by the HIV/AIDS virus, which are T cells, and the helper T cells specifically. And well, okay, so it answers that slide for the pathology of HIV/AIDS. And then that leads us into our pathologies in general. So that is our lymphatic system, and a very simple system. Again, it's just, you know, knowing the basic structures and loosely understanding the functions. I think we'll call it on that one, and we'll see you guys in the next video.